November 22nd, 2005. I'm Ted Koppel, and this is Nightline. Tonight, remembering an old friend.
Maybe the distance between life and death isn't as great as you think.
Maury has now kept me in his class as his eternal graduate student.
Talk about it.
I mean, we're not all going to die the same way.
Accept it.
I was so taken with Maury's attitude towards life.
And go for it. Be involved.
His spirit, his refusal to complain about things.
Keep an open heart and open it up further and further and further.
And what can this old guy tell me?
Love each other or die.
Tonight, a Tuesday with Maury. It was sometime in the late winter of 1995 that Richard Harris, a longtime senior producer on this broadcast, brought an article in the Boston Globe to my attention. It was all about this retired sociology professor from Brandeis University. The man was dying of ALS, also known as Lou Gehrig's disease. It's a bad way to go. The synapses, the connectors that send electronic messages from the brain to the muscles, break down, and gradually over a period of months, the patient can't move his legs or feet anymore. Then the hands and arms go, and eventually he can't swallow. So here was this retired professor, Maury Schwartz, telling the Boston Globe that he was ready to talk with anyone about the process. Dying, that is. I said, fine, let's do it. Let's go talk to the guy. We sent producer Dan Morris up to Maury's home in Newton, Massachusetts. I'm giving you all this background for a couple of reasons. First, Richard and Dan did all the spade work on that story, just as literally scores of producers over the past 26 years have taken rough ideas and sculpted them into brilliant work, for which I've received most of the credit. But then there is what happened next. Roone Arledge, who was president of ABC News at the time, hated the story. Who wants to hear about death and dying, he said. And Maury wasn't at all sure that he wanted to talk to me. But ultimately, he did. 3 times before he died in November of 1995, almost exactly 10 years ago. It has been perhaps the most popular series of broadcasts we've ever done. So, since everything has to end somewhere, we thought we'd end this chapter of Nightline with Maury and his biographer, a former student, Mitch Albom, who wrote the book Tuesdays with Maury.
I don't quite remember actually the sporting event I was covering. They all blur together. But when I came back to the television set, did the American male tradition of flipping the remote control. Was somewhere between 11:30 and midnight, and I came upon your program. And there was you, I expected. And then the other side of the screen was my old professor, Maury Schwartz, who didn't look like the Maury Schwartz that I remembered. He was thinner. He was sicker looking, white-haired, but I heard his voice, and I said, that's him, and that's how I found out that he had ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, and didn't have that much longer left to live. I hadn't seen him in 16 years, and your program was actually the first time I saw his face since the day I graduated college.
Maury, you and I are doing something that doesn't seem to be much in favor in this country. We're not only talking about death, we're laughing, right? We're making jokes about it, being a little bit irreverent about it.
Absolutely.
Although there are times when clearly...
I am very sad about it.
Very sad.
Yes.
You clearly feel that we should talk about it more.
More and more and more. For me, it's one of the most important things. If you hide it, it generates inside you. You suffer with it.
Now, what was it about either what you heard Maury say or what that stirred up in your memory that caused you to do what actually, at the time, I mean, it turned out to be one of the most successful books of all time, but you couldn't possibly have known that at that time?
I didn't intend to write a book at all. First of all, it was guilt. I mean, let's be honest. You see someone is sick and dying and you haven't contacted them. In point of fact, which I never wrote in the book, I used to call Maury Coach when I was in college. You know, a sports affectation. Hi, Coach. How you doing, Coach? And after your show, I decided to phone him That's all I was going to do, was just make a phone call. Ease my conscience, that would be it. And I dialed his number, which was still listed in information. A nurse answered. She handed him the phone. I said, hi, Professor Schwartz. My name is Mitch Albom. I don't know if you remember me. And the first thing he said to me after 16 years was, how come you didn't call me Coach? And I think right then I said, I can't just hang up the phone and say, you know, well, I heard about the bad news. I wish you the best of luck. I needed to see him again.
I got dealt this hand. Some mornings I'm angry and bitter, but it doesn't last too long. Then I get up and say, I want to live. So I have to cry, and I have to mourn, but I also have to enjoy the life I have left.
I was so taken with Maury's attitude towards life, his spirit, his refusal to complain about things, that I ended up spending the whole afternoon that first time and into the evening. And when I flew back on the plane that night, I asked myself one of those sort of life-defining questions. I said, you know, he's 78 years old and dying, and you're 37 years old and perfectly healthy, and he seems 10 times happier and more content with his life than you are. What's the matter with this picture? And that began the visits back, not for a book or any kind of thing like that. It was for me, and to try to learn something from an old professor about life.
My meditation teacher told me something that blew my mind the other day. I wish you were here. She said to me, Maury, maybe your view of life and death should be reconsidered. Maybe the distance between life and death isn't as great as you think. And I said, you mean it's not a chasm? The two mountains and that big valley between? This is my words now. You mean it's only a little bridge across a small river?
Why do you think it is that you were so dissatisfied with your life at that time, and he, given all that was confronting him, was so at peace?
Because he had been consistent from the time I knew him as a professor to the end of his life with the things that were important to him, and I hadn't. I changed mine. I think I turned more towards how many hours can you work, how many jobs can you hold, how many accomplishments can you stack up, how many zeros can you get after a paycheck. Maury had never been about any of those things, and wasn't at the end. And consequently, the things that mattered to him most, people, memories, affecting people, having them around, they were there for him at the end. And so he didn't hit that moment at the end of your life where you say, oh my gosh, I'm going to actually die, and I didn't do this, and I didn't have this, and I don't have any friends, and my loved ones are estranged. There wasn't any of that. And I think that's why he was consistent his final days as much as he was when I knew him as a professor.
But I said, I'm going to try my best. I made a willful determination to call on all my resources to enable me to live with composure, as I put it. And so far, I'm able to do it. Whether I'll be able to continue when that moment comes, I don't know. But I'm betting on myself that I will.
This is ABC News Nightline. Brought to you by Advil.
You and I both, in different ways, had the same experience. My experience was that the president of ABC News said, why are you doing a program about a guy who's dying? What a downer. Nobody's going to want to watch that. And we ended up doing 3 programs and rebroadcasting them several times. I suspect when you first went to I don't know how you did it. Did you go to a publisher, an agent?
Publisher.
Great idea. I want to, it's my old college professor, and he's dying, and he's a really neat guy.
Well, it wasn't quite like that. First of all, I had no intention of writing a book. That only came about when Maury told me how in debt he was for all his medical bills. And then I got the idea, well, I need to help him in some way. It really wasn't until about a month before Maury died that we found a publisher and agreed upon one that would do it. And he said, really, who? And I said, Doubleday. He said, oh, I heard of them, because spoken like a true academic. And I said, yeah, not only that, but they're going to give us an advance, and I'm going to take it all and pay off all your medical bills, and you won't have to leave your family with any debt, which was his biggest fear.
He offered a really rare gift in that he not only was prepared to, he wanted to talk about that which affects all of us at one point or another, but which most people don't want to talk about, dying.
First, talk about it. Don't hide in the corner. Don't try to conceal it as if it's something horrible, because all it does is destroy your self-esteem. And it's very important to keep that self-esteem. 2, accept it. This is you. You are a disabled person. I'm not ashamed of that, as long as I have my mind and my heart. 3, keep an open heart and open it up further and further and further until you encompass as much as you can with your love. Sounds kind of soppy, but it's not.
And he took the horror out of it.
Exactly.
Remember, he would say, don't pay attention to this body, which of course was decaying and useless and needed to be carried around. He said, the body is just the carton I was shipped in. It's not me. He said, look at my eyes. I'm still here. This body is cardboard, you know. And I think once you start looking at it that way, even someone like me who certainly went there as squeamish as anybody else about death, I was no, you know, Florence Nightingale. I didn't like being around sick people. I didn't like the smells. I didn't like the seeing the decay. I didn't like the coughing or the bathroom visits or things like that. But I don't know, Maury had a way of just sort of making you see, look, this is all peripheral. You can get through it.
My hands are going, which is the next phase after the legs.
What does that mean when you say your hands are going?
I won't be able to use them in a short while. Things are very heavy to pick up.
You used a cruder example when we were in your bedroom before.
Should I say it on TV?
Go ahead and say it on TV, because in many respects, I think it brings it home far more than everything else you've been talking about.
I'll say it on TV then. Somebody's going to have to wipe my ass.
We had developed something we called the ass wipe test.
Yes. Yes.
You know, was he going to be able to, was he still going to be able to wipe his own behind?
Right.
And when he couldn't, I remember him talking about that and describing it as an act of love that a friend of his was able to do for him.
On our Tuesdays, we would have the same ass wipe test. And he said, well, he said, at first, you know, I hated to lose it, that ability. It seemed shameful. He said, but then I realized that deep inside all of us, there is an infant who remembers what that was like when our mothers used to do it with the powder and things like that. And I don't think we ever got enough of that. And so I'm just enjoying my second chance at reveling in being an infant again.
I am being fed now. I cannot feed myself.
You can't feed yourself?
At all. Any meal.
And when you have to go to the bathroom, you need someone...
Puts me on the commode.
Right.
Waits there. That's how far it's gotten.
How difficult has it been to adjust to that?
I have no shame, because that's a cultural phenomenon that we've had built into us. My dignity comes from my inner self. And the fact that I can keep myself composed and humorous if necessary, and fully human all the time.
If you can turn that level of dependency, that level of illness, that level of decay into something positive to see about life, maybe there isn't as much to fear about dying as we all think. You know, and I only hope when my time comes, I can somehow find the courage and the perspective that he had to turn that into something positive. I could do it for myself.
He never really knew what a phenomenon he was going to turn into.
No, that's the best part, isn't it?
Well, I don't know if it's the best part. He would have enjoyed the hell out of it.
He would have. He was a ham, and I think he really enjoyed being on your program. I have to say, you know, I've never told you this, but I was a little bothered by your third visit when, by this point, I was visiting with him regularly, and he said that you guys were going to come back for another visit, and I felt that, you know, maybe that was going to be exploitative or something. Why? Why? Because you're close enough to dying that it's okay for them to visit again, and he didn't look at it at all like that.
Maury, you don't have to do this if you don't want to. I'll help you put your glasses on. But I think a fairly simple way of demonstrating to people what the nature of this disease is if you would just show us. Try to put your glasses on.
I'll be happy to do that.
Okay.
Can't do it.
You can't do it. No.
Thank you.
First of all, he liked you, and he said, Ted's a good guy. Ted said he'd come even if I couldn't do the interview, which I thought was very kind of you. And he said, you don't understand. I want my story to be told.
I was just thinking, Maury, that so often on this program I say to people, any last thoughts? Has a whole different meaning when I say it to you.
That's right. Any last thoughts? Well, I appreciate the fact that I could get my message across, that you were facilitators, and I would just repeat what Orton said, the last line of one of his poems. And, oh, maybe that, yeah. Love each other or die. I think he's right. That's my last thought.
Enough, Maury.
Canuck?
Canuck.
You think we did what you wanted us to?
I think so.
I gave you what I had.
You always do.
To the very end. The disease is not going to get my spirit.
No.
Get my body, will not get my spirit.
You've done good, Maury.
I'll bargain with him up there. Having done a good life, do I get to be one of the angels?
Yeah, you'd be cute with a pair of wings, Maury. Ah, Lord. Did it work for you? I mean, did it change your life, these Tuesdays with Maury?
You know, I get asked that a lot, if it changed my life, and the fact is, it's part of my life every day. I don't go anywhere where somebody doesn't, in the course of a day, say something about Maury, something about the book, something about a lesson that they learned, pull out a photo from their wallet and say, you know, this is my Maury, you know, he did this to me, or when Maury said this about that, it happened here. I'll have people will come up to me, used to come up in airports and say, who's going to win the Super Bowl? And now they'll grab my arm and they'll say, I have to tell you about my wife who died of cancer, and the last thing we did together was read your book. When you have that stuff happen to you every day, Ted, can't help but change you. I always joke around that Maury has now kept me in his class every day for the last 7 years as his eternal graduate student, constantly going over these lessons because it's his way of sort of making sure I don't forget them.
There's this little wave, this he wave, who's bobbing up and down, how short it is, bobbing up and down on the ocean, having a great time, and all of a sudden he recognizes he's going to crash into the shore. And this big, wide ocean, he's now moving toward the shore, and get annihilated. He gets so despairing. My God, what's going to happen to me? And he's got this sour, despairing look on his face. Along comes a female wave, bobbing up and down, having a great time. The female wave says to the male wave, why are you so depressed? The male says, you don't understand. You're going to crash into that shore, and you'll be nothing. She says, you don't understand. You're not a wave. You're part of the ocean. That's what I believe.
You're part of the ocean.
That's right. I'm not a wave. I'm part of all of humanity.
I'll be back in a moment with one more closing thought. There's this quiz I give to some of our young interns when they first arrive at Nightline. I didn't do it with the last batch. It's a little too close to home. How many of you, I'll ask, can tell me anything about Eric Sevareid? Blank stares. How about Howard K. Smith or Frank Reynolds? Not a twitch of recognition. Chet Huntley? Jack Chancellor? Still nothing. David Brinkley sometimes causes a hand or two to be raised, and Walter Cronkite may be glad to learn that a lot of young people still have a vague recollection that he once worked in television news. What none of these young men and women in their late teens and early 20s appreciates, until I pointed out to them, is that they have just heard the names of 7 anchormen or commentators who were once so famous that everyone in the country knew their names. Everybody. Trust me, the transition from one anchor to another is not that big a deal. Cronkite begat Rather, Chancellor begat Brokaw, Reynolds begat Jennings, and each of them did a pretty fair job in his own right. You've always been very nice to me, so give this new anchor team for Nightline a fair break. If you don't, I promise you the network will just put another comedy show in this time slot, and then you'll be sorry. That's our report for tonight. I'm Ted Koppel in Washington. For all of us here at ABC News, good night.